height, dim the streets in moonlight bright. We dissect the cinematic art, real by real we pull apart.
Hello, welcome back to Real Talk, the show where we break down films that shape us, shake us, and sometimes leave us feeling like we need a long walk afterward. I'm your host, Josh, and today we're stepping into the gritty, messy, and emotionally charged world of 13, Catherine Hardwicke's unforgettable 2003 coming-of-age drama. Now, 13 isn't your typical lighthearted teenage romp. It's not about prom dresses, first crushes, or quirky high school antics. Instead, it grabs you by the shoulders and drags you head first into the chaotic life of 13-year-old Tracy Freeland, played by a young Evan Rachel Wood. Tracy starts the film as a straight-A student, but her life takes a sharp turn when she falls under the spell of Evie Zamora, her school's queen bee of rebellion, played by Nikki Reed, who also co-wrote the screenplay at just 14 years old. Set in the neon-glazed, palm tree-studded chaos of early 2000s Los Angeles, 13 is raw, unfiltered, and totally real. It doesn't shy away from the darker side of adolescence, peer pressure, identity crisis, and family conflict, and the desperate need for acceptance. These are universal themes, but Hardwicke and Reed deliver them with gut-punch honesty that's uniquely female. It's a perspective that doesn't just peek behind the curtain of teenage girlhood, it tears the curtain down and it sets it on fire. This film is a cornerstone in women-directed cinema, part of that broader wave in the early 2000s when, like we talked about in the past, indie films are gaining traction and female filmmakers are beginning to carve out more space for themselves. Hardwicke's vision captures the chaos of growing up, and there's a rawness to it, a kind of handheld, in-your-face authenticity that's hard to forget. But here's the thing, 13, it isn't perfect. For all its boldness and gut-wrenching moments, there are parts where it stumbles, where the drama feels maybe a little too heightened for the narrative, or the narrative may be just a bit overstuffed. Now, that's not to say it's not worth watching, far from it, but it does leave us wondering, does it still resonate 20 years later, or has time dulled its edge? So stick around as I unpack the layers of 13. We'll explore its themes, the characters, and lasting impact. And I'll talk about why it's a must-watch for some, and why it might be a tougher watch for others, and why for me it just misses the mark. So get ready to dive in, because this is still going to be a pretty fun ride. Hey, need a boost without the crash? Head over to dubby.gg, that's dubby.gg, for all your energy drink needs. No sugar, no fillers, just clean focus and serious flavor. And here's the kicker. Use the code REALREAL, REALREEL, at checkout and score 10% off your order. That's REALREAL, one word, for 10% off at dubby.gg. Fuel up, stay sharp, keep it real. Looking for chills that crawl up your spine and reviews that cut deeper than a butcher's blade? Welcome to Real Talk Horror Edition, where classic slashers, indie creepers, and cult nightmares are dissected with a bloody passion. Whether you're into slow burns or splatterfests, we've got the guts, the gore, and the geek out. So dim the lights, press play, and let your darkest curiosities run wild. Real Talk Horror Edition, where horror lives and breathes. Real horror, real talk. Available anywhere you get your podcasts. So let's start by taking a dive into Catherine Hardwicke's journey, because I think her story is almost as interesting as the film itself. Before stepping into the director's chair, Hardwicke was a production designer, and not just on any films. She worked on visually striking projects like Vanilla Sky and one of my favorites, Three Kings. Her ability to create immersive, atmospheric worlds is undeniable, and you can absolutely see those skills shine here in 13. But her transition to directing wasn't just a career pivot, it was deeply personal. So here's where things I think get really fascinating. The idea for 13 came from Hardwicke's close relationship with Nikki Reed, who co-wrote the screenplay at just 14 years old. Can you imagine a teenager writing about her own life experiences? I mean, it's no wonder the film feels so raw and authentic. Hardwicke saw Reed struggling to navigate adolescence and decided to channel that energy into a story. Together, they created something that it wasn't polished or sugar-coated. It was messy, honest, and sometimes hard to watch, but I think that helped to make it special. So with that, let me set the scene for you when 13 was made. The early 2000s, they were a wild time for indie cinema. There was the surge of low-budget, high-impact films that weren't afraid to take risks. It was a time when directors could push boundaries, especially in stories that didn't fit neatly into the established Hollywood mold. And within this landscape, Catherine Hardwicke's voice stood out. Think about it. Coming-of-age films, back then being filtered through the male lens, even movies that centered on girls tended to feel like they were written by people who'd never been one. And 13 shattered that. It gave us a grittier, unvarnished look at girlhood told by women who understood it intimately. Hardwicke's direction felt at times like a breath of fresh air or maybe a slap in the face, depending on how much the film's intensity hit you. But either way, it was impossible to ignore. But we can't talk about 13 without mentioning the cultural backdrop. The early 2000s were a time of enormous change. Post 9/11 anxieties were shaping everything from politics to pop culture, and the internet was really beginning to transform how we communicated and connected. This sense of upheaval is all over the film. The chaotic energy of Tracy and Evie's rebellion mirrors a world grappling with uncertainty. And then you can't forget the broader conversations happening in Hollywood. Female directors still fighting to get their stories told. Hardwicke's debut was a bold statement and proof that stories about girls, especially messy and complicated ones, deserved a place in the spotlight. So when you watch 13, you're not just watching a movie, you're really stepping into a moment in time. It's a product of its era, shaped by the indie film renaissance and the push for female representation and a world in flux. And yet its themes feel timeless at most. And who hasn't felt like Tracy at some point, really desperate to fit in somewhere, unsure of where they belong, and grappling with the overwhelming pressures of just growing up? All right, so let's expand and talk about the story and the characters, because this is where the film really grabs you by the collar and doesn't really let go. The film follows Tracy Freeland, the seemingly bright and well-adjusted middle schooler who's doing great in school, has supportive, though imperfect family, and seems like the kind of kid who wouldn't stray too far from the rules. But then comes Evie Zamora, this popular, magnetic, and undeniably provocative girl who embodies everything Tracy thinks she wants to be. Evie is confident, glamorous, and utterly intoxicating to someone like Tracy, who's yearning for validation and a sense of belonging. Their friendship kicks off a whirlwind transformation for Tracy, from an honor roll student to someone experimenting with shoplifting, drugs, self-harm, and just a whole string of destructive choices. And it's fascinating and heartbreaking how quickly and completely the spiral happens. Evan Rachel Wood as Tracy is absolutely wonderful. She nails the fragile line between innocence and rebellion, making Tracy's descent feel almost inevitable, but never less than gut-wrenching. It's one of those performances where you can feel the character's internal battle in every look and gesture. And then Nikki Reed as Evie. Reed's performance is layered. Evie is manipulative. Sure, she is, but she's also a victim of her own circumstances. She's not just a bad influence. She's this deeply broken person trying to cover it up with charm and bravado. And then one of my favorites, Holly Hunter as Melanie, Tracy's mom. She really brings a vulnerability to the role that grounds the whole film. Melanie isn't a perfect parent. She's really juggling her own issues, from a demanding boyfriend to financial struggles, but her love for Tracy is always there. Her desperation to reconnect with her daughter is heartbreaking because you can feel how much she cares, but how completely out of her depth she is. And now here's where the film starts to get especially interesting. The female perspective that Hardwicke brings to the storytelling. This isn't your typical glossy teenage drama where the struggles feel sanitized or overly dramatized. Instead, Hardwicke leans into the messiness of adolescence, the insecurities, the peer pressure, the constant tug of war between wanting independence and craving guidance. Take the scenes involving body image, for example. Tracy's obsession with her appearance, whether she's trying on Evie's clothes or staring at herself in the mirror, is so painfully relatable. It's not just about vanity, it's about wanting to feel seen and valued in a world that's constantly telling her she's not enough. And then there's this relationship between Tracy and Melanie. The way the film explores their dynamic, it feels raw and real. There's love, frustration, guilt, and even resentment, all wrapped up in this unspoken fear of losing each other. But while the film nails a lot of these emotional beats, there are a few places where it stumbles, like Evie's character arc. Don't get me wrong, she's absolutely compelling, but you can't help but wish we got more of her backstory. We get hints of trauma and instability, but they're never fully explored. What drives Evie to behave the way she does? Is she just a product of her environment, or is there something deeper at play? Those unanswered questions make her feel a bit underdeveloped, especially when compared to Tracy and her mom Melanie. That said, the authenticity of the characters and their relationships is what keeps you hooked. The dialogue feels like something actual teenagers would say, not what adults think teenagers would sound like. And the interactions, whether it's a heated argument or a more tender moment, they're so emotionally charged that you just can't look away. 13 never offers easy answers or neat resolutions. It's messy, just like adolescence, and that's what makes it so powerful. The characters, flawed, vulnerable, and real, stay with you, and it's a film that's going to force you to confront some uncomfortable truths about growing up, about parenting, and about the lengths we'll go to feel like we belong. Now let's dive into 13's themes and symbolism that shape the story. So this is a film about identity and belonging, and it never pulls any of its punches. Tracy's journey into rebellion isn't the typical, bad girl gone wild narrative that you might expect, because it's much deeper than that. Her actions aren't just about thrill seeking, they're a real cry for help. A desperate attempt to gain some control and find validation in this world that's shifting beneath her feet. And honestly, who hasn't felt that at some point? Adolescence is messy, it's awkward and painful phase. 13 really captures that in an uncomfortable way. The theme of belonging hits hard. Tracy is essentially a loner at the start, a bright, ambitious girl who doesn't quite fit in. And when Evie waltzes into her life, she offers Tracy a golden ticket to the cool kids club. But it's not just about fitting in, it's about feeling seen. Evie's attention gives Tracy a sense of power and connection she's been craving, even if it comes at a high price. Family dynamics are another big theme here. Tracy's relationship with her mom is fraught, but it's tender. There's love, but also just a gulf of misunderstanding. Melanie is doing her best as a single mom, but she's stretched thin, and Tracy's rebellion throws her into an absolute tailspin. The film nails the tension between wanting independence and still needing guidance, a push-pull sort of dynamic that defines so many great parent-teen relationships. And then let's talk about how all of this is reflected visually, because 13 doesn't just tell us these things, it really does show us. And the handheld camera work is brilliant. It's shaky, unpolished, and invasive, like we're eavesdropping on Tracy's life. This style makes the whole experience more raw and immediate, like we're right there with her in the chaos. And the lighting, the natural light gives the film a gritty realism, almost like a documentary. It strips away the gloss and glamour and leaves everything exposed, kind of like adolescence itself. There's nowhere to hide. And one of the recurring motifs that stands out is the mirrors, because they're everywhere in this movie, and not just for checking your makeup. Mirrors here symbolize these characters' fractured identities. Tracy's constant self-examination reflects her struggle to figure out who she is or who she's supposed to be. Is she the good daughter? Is she the wild rebel or the perfect friend? Mirrors capture her fragmented sense of self and her internal tug-of-war between these identities. And you can't overlook the symbolism in Tracy's physical transformation. The piercings, the makeup, the edgy clothes, they're more than just a makeover, they're armor. She's trying to shield herself from her vulnerabilities by creating this persona that just screams confidence, and even as she's starting to fall apart inside. But here's the thing, I think the film doesn't always nail the balance between subtlety and impact. For example, Tracy's self-harm is one of the most visceral and heartbreaking symbols in the movie. It's a physical manifestation of her internal pain, a way for her to regain a sense of control. But at times, the way it's presented feels a bit on the nose. There's a scene where she stares at her scars in a way that's almost too deliberate, like as if the film is shouting, "Look, this is her pain." It's powerful, but it risks losing some of its emotional nuance in moments like that. The film also leans really heavily on contrasts. There's a sharp divide between Tracy's two worlds, her home life and her life with Evie. At home, everything is messy, but warm. Muted colors, soft lighting. But then when she's with Evie, it's all vibrant colors, harsh lights, sensory overload. The visual dichotomy reinforces that emotional tug-of-war that Tracy's experiencing. And you can't forget the details, the little details that add layers to the story. The scene where Tracy and Evie play dress-up and pose provocatively for the camera is a gut punch. Because it's not just kids playing around, it's a commentary on how society pressures and media influence can warp young girls' perceptions of themselves. If there's one area where the symbolism here falters, it's in the occasional tonal shifts. 1 minute, the film feels like a hard-hitting drama, and the next, it really veers into melodrama. It's like the film can't quite decide if it wants to be a gut-wrenching portrait of adolescence or an exaggerated cautionary tale. These shifts can dilute the impact of its symbolism and making certain moments feel less authentic. But despite these hiccups, 13 does excel at capturing the emotional and the psychological landscape of adolescence. The recurring motifs, the raw visuals, and that unflinching exploration of its themes make it a film that really sticks with you. I mean, it might not be perfect, but it's unapologetically honest, and I think that makes it very powerful. When 13 hit theaters in 2003, it made an immediate splash. Critics couldn't stop talking about its unflinching look at adolescence, the raw performances, and its no-holds-barred take on the darker side of teenage rebellion. Holly Hunter's portrayal of Melanie was so powerful that it earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress. Evan Rachel Wood also broke out as a star to watch, delivering a performance that was both gut-wrenching and still really relatable. For a teenager to carry such a heavy load, layered role that was, and carry that level of authenticity, it's not something that you see every day. That said, the film didn't win over everyone. Some critics felt the intensity went a little too far, like the movie was so focused on shocking its audience that it veered into melodrama. Those scenes where Tracy is screaming at her mom, self-harming, or diving headfirst into risky behavior, well, for some it felt overwhelming, almost like the filmmakers were hitting us over the head with how real things were supposed to be. And while the film's chaotic energy mirrored Tracy's emotional state, a few reviewers thought it could have used a touch more nuance in certain spots. And let's not forget the cultural conversation it sparked. At the time, 13 was one of the few films daring enough to confront issues like peer pressure, self-harm, and substance abuse head-on, because it didn't sugarcoat or glamorize any of it. Which I think is a big part why it resonated so deeply with teens and parents alike. The mother-daughter dynamic between Tracy and Melanie hit home for a lot of people, showing the messy and complicated love that often exists in families struggling to hold it together. Fast forward 20 years and 13 is still somewhat of a touchstone for coming-of-age cinema. It's got this cult-like status now. People look back at it and say, that movie really got how messy and painful growing up can be. You can see its influence in later films like 8th Grade or Lady Bird, which also explore adolescence with honesty, but maybe a bit more humor and balance. 13 set the stage for these kinds of stories by proving that audiences were ready for something more real. But as much as the film broke ground, it's not perfect. The rushed ending, for example, leaves you wanting more resolution. Tracy's journey feels incomplete, like filmmakers hit pause instead of stop. And while the intensity worked in its favor for the most part, there were moments where you wish it had taken a step back and let the story breathe a little. Still, the impact of 13 can't be denied. It was bold, it was messy, it was daring. In a lot of ways, it was ahead of its time. It showed us a side of adolescence that we weren't really seeing on screen, especially from a female perspective. Whether you love it or feel it misses the mark in places, it is the kind of film that sticks with you, like it or not. And it's fascinating how it continues to resonate differently for people. If you watch it as a teenager, it feels almost too real, like looking into a mirror you'd rather avoid. As an adult, you might see through Melanie's eyes, understanding her heartbreak and helplessness on a deeper level. And that's where the beauty of 13 lies, because it evolves with you, revealing new layers when you watch it. And I think that's why we're still talking about it. Sure, it's flawed, but it is fearless. It dared to hold up a magnifying glass to adolescence and say, this is what it can look like: messy, painful, chaotic, but still human. And it isn't just that, I think in the end, that's what a coming of age film is supposed to do, even if it didn't hit all the right notes for me. So let's talk about, why does 13 matter? Let's start with the obvious. It's not just a movie about adolescence. It's a movie that looks adolescence dead in the eye and doesn't flinch. It's messy, uncomfortable, and sometimes downright heartbreaking. And that's what makes it so memorable. Catherine Hardwicke and Nikki Reed dared to tell a story that feels raw and unvarnished, and that's rare even now. Think about how we usually see girlhood on screen. It's often sanitized or romanticized. Endless montages of sleepovers, first kisses, and sunny afternoons that don't really capture the storm of emotions and struggles happening beneath the surface. 13 flips that script. It says, hey, girlhood can be messy, it can be chaotic, and it can hurt, so let's talk about that. And I think that's why this film is stuck around in the cultural consciousness. It's not afraid to be real. And I think something else that makes it even more special is that it is a story told by women. This isn't some outsider's view of what teenage girls go through. It's rooted in lived experience. Nikki Reed wasn't even out of her teens when she co-wrote the script, and you can feel the authenticity in every scene. Catherine Hardwicke, as a director, brings a kind of unfiltered, intimate style that pulls you right into Tracy's world. You're not just watching her unravel, you're practically living it with her. For modern audiences, 13 is still incredibly relevant. Sure, the fashion and tech are a little dated, flip phones and whatever, but the pressures young people face haven't gone anywhere. In fact, the social media, those pressures might even be worse today. The need to fit in, the lure of validation from the cool crowd, and the strain on parent-child relationships, it's all still here. Watching Tracy's story play out is a gut check for anyone who's ever felt like they were losing themselves to fit into someone else's idea of who they should be. And at the same time, the film reminds us to approach these struggles with empathy. It's easy to judge Tracy or even Evie for their decisions, but 13 asks us to look deeper. It shows us that underneath the rebellion, there's pain, confusion, and a desperate need to be seen and loved. And isn't that something we've all felt at one point or another? Now, is 13 a perfect film? Not quite. There are moments where it feels heavy-handed, where the rawness teeters into melodrama, but I'd argue that those imperfections are part of its charm. It's a movie that swings big, that takes risks, and even when it stumbles a little, it's doing so in pursuit of something that's meaningful. So 13 earns its place in the coming-of-age canon because it does dare to be bold. It's a movie that doesn't just observe adolescence from a distance. It dives right into the deep end, flaws and all. And whether you're a teenager now, a parent, or just someone who remembers what it felt like to be 13, there's something in this film that hits home. So yeah, maybe it's not the kind of movie you rewatch for comfort, but it's the kind of movie that makes you think, it makes you feel, and maybe even makes you feel a little uncomfortable. And sometimes that's exactly what great storytelling is supposed to do. All right, well, let's start to wrap things up. 13 is a film that stays with you because it's raw and gut-wrenching, and it's a brutally honest portrayal of adolescence. There's no denying its impact. Evan Rachel Wood, Nikki Reed, and Holly Hunter all give performances that feel real enough that you forget at times you're watching a movie. The unflinching look at self-destruction and the search for belonging is powerful and at times painfully relatable. But for me, as I've mentioned, it's not a perfect film. I give 13 a 6.5 out of 10. And here's why. While it gets so much right, the acting, the tone, and the emotional intensity, it stumbles in areas that hold it back from greatness. At times, it feels like the movie is trying just a little too hard to shock us. The gritty, handheld camera work is effective, but paired with some of the more sensationalized moments, it starts to feel less like we're watching a nuanced story unfold and more like we're being hit over the head with a "look how edgy this is" vibe. The pacing can be uneven too. Some scenes are so visceral and immersive that they pull you in completely, but others feel rushed, almost like they're trying to check off a box on that teen rebellion checklist. The film's relentless intensity can also work against it. There's very little room to breathe, no moments of levity or quiet reflection to balance out the chaos. And while that may be the point, it can leave an audience feeling emotionally drained and not always in a good way. Despite these flaws, though, I have to give credit where it's due. 13 is a bold debut for Catherine Hardwicke, a courageous effort from Nikki Reed to put such a personal story out into the world. It's a film that doesn't pull punches, and even if it misses the mark here and there, it's a movie that is absolutely worth talking about and reflecting on. Now, next time on Real Talk, though, we're going to switch gears a bit. We're going to dive into the quirky and heartfelt world of 1998's The Slums of Beverly Hills, directed by Tamara Jenkins. This one's got humor, heart, and a sharp eye for the awkwardness of growing up. If you've ever felt like the odd one out, this one is the film for you. In the meantime, I want to hear what you thought about 13. Did it hit you as hard as it hit me, or did you have a different take? Maybe there's another film you'd love for us to cover. Drop your thoughts in the comments or reach out to us on social media. Our social media, we're on Real Talk on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. At Real Talk Pod on X or Twitter, whatever it's called these days. And email is therealrealtalk@gmail.com. So reach out, let us know what's going on. And in the meantime, though, please, if you are enjoying these deep dives into the world of cinema, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow the podcast. If you like something a little darker, check out Real Talk Horror, where we get into the darker corners of cinema. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in to Real Talk. Until next time, keep watching, keep loving, and keep those reels rolling. We'll talk to you soon.
Underneath the sunscreen, gleam, talking reels and all their schemes. Dusty scenes and dreams unfold, stories told in shadows bold. Gritty plots and whispers tight, dim the streets and moonlight bright. We dissect the cinematic art, real by real we pull apart. The real talk where voices play with velvet words and starlit sway, reviewing tales both light and dark, classic films that leave a mark. Dive deep into celluloid night, critique the legends in our sight. Every frame a layer appeal, truth and intrigue.